Glad you made it today. We have a fabulous program for you. Not that we don't every month, but really excited about this one. We respectfully acknowledge that statewide we are on the ancestral homelands of the indigenous nations that have inhabited these lands since time immemorial, including the Akchin, Akamila Odom, Apache, Colorado River, Fort Mojave, Gila River, Havasupai, Hopi, Wallapai, Navajo, Paiute, Pima, Peepash, Wechan, Yaqui, and Yavapai peoples. Their traditional care and honoring of these lands allow us to be here today. Today we have an incredible program with two authors that'll really pique your interest. Please join us in October when we have our Arizona State Attorney General, Chris Mays, and Francesca Martin, who is the founder of Keep Arizona Blue Student Coalition. And in November, we'll have our illustrious Adrian Fontes, Secretary of State, Patty O'Neill, who's the Maricopa County Democrats chair, and Melissa Galarza, chair of LD12 Democrats, the largest LD in Arizona. So we have a good lineup for you. We know that the ballots are going to begin dropping next month. And there are 13 measures on the ballot. It's a 3-page ballot. People are afraid that what's going to happen is people will get their ballots mixed up with other people who are sitting there. So please be very careful. There are 13 propositions, and here's the general advice that we're giving you. Please vote yes on Prop 139. That's for Arizona Abortion Access Act. All of the other 100, 200, and 300 propositions are what we call the dirty dozen. Please vote no on those. There are other bonds, overrides, and municipal initiatives, and those are usually 400s. And our general advice is please vote yes on those. Of course, you will always vote for money for schools. That's with the bonds and the overrides. If you want more in-depth information about the propositions, please go to cebv.us. That's the website for civic engagement beyond voting, and they have interesting information about all of the propositions, in-depth information. If you want to know about school boards, please go to azeducatorsvote.org. It will give you all of the school districts in Arizona and recommended school board candidates. And judges. I don't have information on all the judges, but here is what the general consensus is. These guys here, you can easily and comfortably vote no on. Clint Bollock, Catherine King, Angela Patton, and Chris Curry. They are the ones who have supported the all of the initiatives that went through and were begun by the state legislature. And they will generally be negative against voting, against personal rights. These people, if you want to vote, cast a vote of, oh, yes, please keep them in. Scott Blaney, Peter Thompson, John Hanna, Michael Kemp, and McGinley. And I don't know what jurisdiction he's in. I will put those on at the end also, but please vote no on these 4.
Janie?
Yes.
I was at a meeting on Sunday and somebody was adamant, and I don't know anything about him, about the last name's Coffee, and voting no.
I don't know about that. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
In any case, please contact your local legislative district or your congressional district, or you can just go to Maricopa County Dems or Arizona Dems and get more information from them. And we have chair remarks from Linda Ambrose. To you, Linda.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. And again, welcome to our Blue Tuesday Forum for September the 24th. The month of September was no exception to the political roller coaster we've been experiencing for all the years Donald Trump has been on the political scene. But I'd say our September high point came during the Harris-Trump debate, where Harris showed Trump and all of America who's the boss as she whooped his behind. She's gained big numbers, but she's still got a ways to go. So it's our Democratic jobs to keep up the momentum, this wave of positivism for the Harris-Walz leadership and all Democratic candidates. We need to make the wave into a tsunami of support. How? By spreading facts and energy into every Democratic candidate's campaign, be it by financial help, by volunteerism, canvassing, and/or by talking to everyone you encounter with positive enthusiasm. As the polls continue their roller coaster ride, let's remember that they are not representing all American voters and are probably not as indicative of voters as are the significant increases in voters registering, especially amongst the younger and eligible generations who are energized by the Harris-Walz ticket. Last month, I promised that I'd finish my highlights of the Democratic convention's last 2 days, but I have much less time to talk to you today because we have a chock-full program of great speakers. So I'll give you fewer but good highlights from those last 2 days, because these are ones we should retain and hold to share with as many inside and outside our circle as possible in this last month before our election. So back to President Obama, and I'm going to do a lot of quoting. We don't want to be in a country of fear and bitter division. We want the better angels of our values to lead us forward to the greater possibilities of mankind in America. End quote. And how can we help to realize these uplifting goals? Quote, try factual persuasion to friends or people you encounter who are on the fence about voting, even if it's just 5 friends. If we all did that, we'd bring Kamala and all Democratic candidates over the finish line, end quote. Hillary Clinton left us with a similar message, and I quote, let's not demean or show disrespect to those who politically disagree with us. Rather, talk to them sincerely about how you think Kamala can help them and make their life better. Following with examples that she offered, listen to Kamala's speeches. She always talks about being for the people, for us. And then listen to Trump's speeches where he's always talking about himself. Count the I's in his talk. And in Hillary's last example, quote, in Kamala's first job working for McDonald's, she began her day saying, how can I help you? And now as our Democratic candidate for President of the United States, she's still beginning her every day talking about us, what she wants to do for us. End of quote. To me, one of the most meaningful last speakers was Republican ex-Congressman Adam Kinzinger, as he directly and sincerely spoke to his fellow Republicans and independents, pardon me, and I quote, Trump is a small man pretending to be big, a perpetrator pretending to be victim. Trump suffocated the soul of Republicans so that we are no longer a conservative party. And continuing, quote, we must put country before party, paying allegiance to our nation's principles, for democracy knows no party. Bedrock values is America's foundation and our future. End of quote. Then there was Leon Panetta, former Secretary of State, CIA leader, and more, importantly reminding us that our next president must immediately be, and I quote, the commander-in-chief sitting behind the resolute desk, talking to allies throughout the world. Also, having served as a senator, it's my morning voice, excuse me. Also having served as a senator on the Senate Intelligence Committee and as Vice President of the United States, she has the necessary experience and leadership to move us forward in keeping America safe and leader of the free world. She stands with our military and honors veterans, end quote. Mark Kelly also spoke of her superb knowledge of foreign policy and even into the NASA intelligence. Then she asked a relevant, skipping a line. Michigan's governor, Gretchen Whitmer, effectively spoke from her gut, and I gladly quote, Kamala sees us, she knows us, she is us. We need one of us as our leader, end quote. Then she asked a relevant question. What does Trump know about the economy? Has he ever in his life filled his gas tank when the first word out of his mouth was chauffeur? And what does he know about the grocery bills? Do you see him buying groceries? End quote. And I must include Whitmer's last quote, but get ready. This is a whopper. Kamala is a total badass, end quote. We know she meant that in the very best way possible, of course. Finally, to rekindle our democratic enthusiasm, I'll finish off quoting a few words from Kamala herself. Growing up, my mother, Shamala, would never let me complain about much of anything without her responding, quit complaining and do something. Continuing, everyone has a right to be safe. A harm against anyone is a harm to us all. Also, quote, I represent the people, and it is our opportunity to chart our way forward, country above party, and peaceful transfer to power. And more, quote, the future is worth fighting for because it is America's future, our future. And around the world, I know where I stand, and I know where America belongs. Lastly, she ended with, quote, we are the heirs to the greatest democracy in the world, where we have the privilege of being an American. It doesn't get any better than that. Thank you for listening and caring. Now on to our great speakers. Janie? Janie, are you there?
Are you on mute? Which shouldn't affect you being able to hear.
No, I went off.
Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. CJ Pascoe is a prominent sociologist whose work has significantly contributed to the understanding of gender, sexuality, and youth culture. She offers profound insights into how young people navigate the intricate landscapes of gender and sexuality, as well as how schools themselves can send homophobic and sexist messages to students. Her book documents the challenges faced by young folks in public schools and, importantly, shows how we can advocate for safer schools that support all young folks through shifts in policy, social activities, and classroom content. Her work continues to influence scholars and activists alike, shaping conversations and policies aimed at creating more inclusive and equitable societies. We are delighted to have you today, CJ.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Now let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay. go. There we go. Everybody can see that okay?
Yes.
Always such relief when it works. So thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate your organization and all the work that you're doing. It's really an honor to be able to listen in. So thank you. Um, Now, I've been studying LGBTQ youth and schools for more than 20 years at this point. And perhaps like many of you, I'm troubled at what I'm seeing right now. After years of declining levels of homophobia, we're seeing a surprising increase in anti-LGBTQ legislation and sentiment. According to the ACLU, as of May 2024, there were 515 anti-LGBTQ bills working their ways through state legislatures. Now, this is a massive growth after last year's record 228 proposed bills. 29 of those bills passed in 20 different states. Now, it's important to know what those bills do. They remove funding for DEI programming, something we're already seeing happen in multiple states across the country. They allow for hate speech against LGBTQ folks. Some of them require the forcible outing of students to their parents. They allow parents to remove any material they deem inappropriate from schools. They prevent trans youth from using the correct bathrooms. They prohibit the use of appropriate names and pronouns. They forbid staff from addressing the very topics of sexuality or gender, and they restrict trans students' abilities to play sports. Now, I find myself asking often these days, as perhaps you may find yourself asking as well, what can we do to make sure our young folks are safe? What can we do to make sure our schools are empowering and safe spaces for students? When researching my new book, Nice is Not Enough, Inequality and the Limits of Kindness, I spent a lot of time with LGBTQ youth at a school I call American High School. It's not the real name, a public school in Oregon. And I learned a lot during my time there about how we can do better to support queer youth in schools. And I want to share some of that with you today. Now, the first thing you should know about American High School is it's the kind of school that many of us would love for our students to attend. It's a school characterized by kindness and love. When you walk into the school building, you see signs like these are taken from the school, under a banner reading "No Room for Hate." If I hear people making racist jokes, I'll ask them to stop. If I see another person physically harassing someone, I'll speak up and protect the victim. If I hear homophobic comments, I'll ask, why does it matter to you? And American High is just that kind of school, the kind of school where there is no room for hate, the kind of school where love and kindness characterize school culture. Students founded a Be Nice Club to promote inclusivity. On Valentine's Day, the cheerleaders posted sweet notes like these on lockers across the school. In the girls' bathroom, it wasn't unusual to see signs like this yellow one. It's a cacophony of student-generated affirmations on a yellow piece of paper. And so, given this culture of kindness, it was little surprise that community members described American High as a special place. Lauren described American as full of the sweetest people in the world. Lila said that students would burn everybody alive if they were like mean. Everybody stands up for each other. It's awesome. It's like, you're homophobic. That's not cool. You're a bully. That's not cool. And Devin described American High as full of violently accepting people. But as I came to discover during my 2 years that I spent at American High School, this kindness and acceptance had limits. Limits that became clear when young folks and staff took stands against systemic racism, when students demanded safer schools and inclusive mental health care, when girls grappled with sexual violence and harassment, and when longstanding rituals at the school shifted in attempts to become more welcoming to LGBTQ young folks. In other words, what was happening at American High, like many of our schools across the country, was a little bit more complicated than what was happening in the hallways. And this complication became really clear to me when students from the school's Gay Straight Alliance banded together to put on the school's first ever drag show. And I think in sort of examining this drag show, it can tell us something about how to support queer youth in schools and how to push back against some of this anti-LGBTQ legislation, policy, and sentiment that we're seeing. Now, mind you, I was at American just before, and maybe just as people started to freak out about drag. At the time I was there, no one was yet protesting drag queen story hours, calling drag performers groomers or pedophiles or predators, right? This was just before 14 different states introduced anti-drag laws targeting queer communities. But even at that time, before that sort of moral panic had hit the nation, students in the Gay Straight Alliance, or the GSA, had to work hard into talking the school into letting them have a drag show. Their advisor, Rose, who you see a quote from here, warned them that when they asked for permission from the administration, that the administration might think they're doing a, quote, weird sex thing. And so they would have to explain to the committee that approved such events what it is they were doing, right? That drag is an expression of gender performance that allows people to explore their identities. And if you're not really familiar with drag shows, it's important to know that drag shows themselves emerged out of celebratory social events held by marginalized queer men, often men of color, and remain to this day a joyous and important queer ritual. And so the students went in front of this administrative committee, talked to them about drag, told them about the history of drag, and they actually got permission to stage this drag show at the high school. And so once they got approval, the GSA members worked hard for weeks with professional drag queens from town, and eventually hosted a drag show that was attended by about 70 audience members. And the drag show was hosted by a local drag queen named Queen Quixotic. And Queen Quixotic opened the show by explaining to attendees what drag is, what a drag family is, how to behave at a drag show. And she said to the audience, she grew up in San Diego and they would have never had anything like this when she was growing up. And she explained to them what drag was. She said, many people think that drag is this. And she motions to herself in, a long, gorgeous gown and her beautiful big hair. She says, many people think that drag is this, a cisgender man doing all this work, but that's not it. Drag is the performance of gender. It's the performance of our identity. And so over the next hour or so after she made this announcement, the students come out and perform in a very understated, somewhat clunky, somewhat awkward drag show. From one student who wore a short burgundy bob and a long purple dress and a face full of overstated drag makeup, dancing to Selena Gomez's I Love You Like a Love Song, to 3 students dressed as the Schuyler sisters and Aaron Burr in drag, doing a rendition of Hamilton, to a cisgender straight male teacher playing a ukulele and lip syncing, to the only out trans teacher in the school performing a Billy Joel song that ended with him removing a feminine white dress that made him so unhappy to reveal a transsexual menace t-shirt. And for those of you who aren't familiar with transsexual menace, it was the first direct action trans rights group in the United States. And of course, when he did this, the entire audience went wild. So at the end of the show, Queen Quixotic comes out and she tells the students that she wants a safe future for our gender diverse siblings out there. Please never stop being yourself. Keep doing you. See all these people here? They all support you. The lights came on, Lady Gaga's Born This Way blared, and the students rushed the stage, arms in the air, waving jackets and dancing with enthusiasm we only usually see at sort of proms and football games. However, and perhaps not surprisingly, in the weeks following the drag show, the GSA advisor shared with me and with the students in the GSA that some of the administrators were not happy with the drag show. Perhaps more surprisingly to me and the members of the students in the GSA, the administrators who were not happy with the drag show included the district equity coordinator, Vanessa. And at a GSA meeting after the drag show, Rose shared these concerns with the students. First, Vanessa was concerned that if trans students would be the target of public outrage if there was pushback to the drag show. Second, Vanessa suggested that drag could be offensive to trans students because drag usually consists of dressing as the quote opposite gender. Third, Vanessa was concerned about the forcible outing of students, saying, what if someone asked to borrow a trans student's wig and that student wasn't out, right? Such a request could result in bullying. Now, the students in the GSA were not happy with this response. They kept interrupting Rose with, what, huh? And eventually many of them were saying, but I'm trans, right? And indeed, about half of the regular attenders of the GSA did not identify as this gender and identified as trans or genderqueer or gender fluid. Additionally, students stated how important it was to see both a trans teacher up there and a cisgender male teacher up there supporting them and the community. So, to be clear, the district equity coordinator is rightly concerned with transphobic bullying. Right now, we know about 60% of queer youth nationwide report being bullied or harassed based on gender expression. However, something made me question whether or not the equity coordinator was more concerned with bullying of queer youth or that an LGBTQ event was happening at the school. Because, like at many high schools, drag does happen elsewhere at American High, and nobody seemed remotely concerned about it. Annually, in fact, a group of high status, mostly athletes, mostly white, mostly straight, and all cisgender boys compete in a popular philanthropy called the Mr. Eagle pageant, a pageant that always involves drag. Now, the pageant, as one person describes it, is a sort of reverse beauty pageant in which 8 boy contestants, under the guidance of 8 girl coordinators, compete in a series of fundraisers culminating in this reverse beauty pageant to raise money for children's hospital units. And they use this quasi sort of pro-life catchphrase, save the babies. The coordinators and the contestants are regularly called heroes, role models, and the faces of the school by students, staff, and parents alike. And contestants dress in drag so frequently as part of this reverse beauty pageant that one mom of a pageant contestant said, they just like to dress up as girls. I don't know why. And indeed, I saw as they dressed up as Disney princesses, Sharpay and Gabriella from High School Musical, Sandy and Rizzo from Grease. But no matter how often these high status young men dressed in drag, they were never seen as homophobic bullies or potential victims. And even more importantly, when these boys did dress in drag, they didn't do it as part of some sort of cultural tradition. They did it in a way that mocked men who dress like women, often through the use of humor and disgust. Take, for instance, what happened the year a bunch of contestants decided to perform this iconic Jingle Bell Rock scene from the movie Mean Girls. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of seeing this movie, part of it includes these girls dressing in these sort of sexy Santa outfits at a school event and performing a risque version of the song Jingle Bell Rock to the horror of the parents and the audience. And so, as part of the Mr. Eagle pageant, a bunch of contestants, straight male contestants, dressed up in very similar outfits to dance in a similar risque way at the reverse beauty pageant. And before these boys took the stage, the MC for the pageant, George, emphasized the hilarity of straight white cisgender boys dressing in drag and dancing seductively, asking, how many of you miss Christmas? Well, our next skit might ruin it for you. And indeed, the boys danced and the audience laughed uproariously at their sexy, skimpy costumes. And when George, the MC, spoke again after their performance, he said, Merry Christmas, I guess. I don't know. You can't unsee that. You can't, that is, unsee a group of young white cisgender men dressed in skirts and tank tops dancing seductively. George's comment reflects a way of thinking that suggests there is something distasteful, horrifying, or inappropriate about men who dress and act in a manner we associate with women. So even though this pageant has been going on for years, it receives local news coverage, is covered in the yearbook, it seems to evoke none of the concern from school administrators that the drag show evoked, even as its participants, the MC, and the audience actively laugh at the practice of drag. Now, I'd love to say this is something that only happens at American High. But what is clear is that this type of drag, the type where high status cisgender straight boys dress and drag for laughter, happens at schools across the country, even in states with horrifyingly anti-queer and anti-drag laws. From spirit weeks that feature gender swaps, to powder puff football games in which boys dress as cheerleaders, to the myriad of reverse beauty pageants used as fundraisers. So far, I've come across the man pageant, the dude pageant, the eagle pageant, the knights pageant, and the big man on campus competition in various schools across the country. Almost all of those events feature straight, high status boys dressing in drag to make fun of men who dress like women. These competitions are so frequent. There's even a TikTok hashtag dedicated to male beauty pageants in high school. Even one of our current vice presidential candidates, it seems, dressed in drag while in college to actively mock men who act like women. So clearly, the problem is not drag itself, it's who is performing drag and why. Is it being performed as a part of a cultural tradition that emerged out of marginalized queer communities? Or is it being performed by high status young men as an extended joke about femininity, gay men, and trans folks? It's hard for many of us to see how high status young men raising money for a good cause can also be participating in a harmful homophobic and transphobic process. In other words, we might struggle to see the way that homophobic and transphobic behaviors don't emerge just from mean kids, but can also be built into school events themselves. And so the question is then, of course, what can we do? How can we support queer and trans folks in schools, protect them from attacks on their rights and mocking like we see here? And I would suggest we need to listen to trans and queer young folks in order to protect them. What do they tell us they need to be safe in schools? And I will say the most important thing that queer youth told me was that they wanted to be included in the life of the school. They wanted what us sociologists call institutional inclusion. And they wanted that inclusion to be guaranteed by policy. So what does this look like? Well, we need to have inclusive buildings, right? We need buildings that are designed to promote the physical and mental safety of all youth. Buildings like this have gender inclusive bathrooms. Right now, about half of trans youth nationwide do not have access to a gender inclusive bathroom. And when they do, it's often located in an out of the way place and governed by strict rules. And like this one, this is a picture of one from American High, you can see that it has a bunch of rules about it, about its use, and only one person can use it at a time. So this means that long lines often form during passing periods, and some trans and queer youth simply give up on using the bathroom because they don't have time. And so that what that means is they can't take care of their bodily needs, and sometimes that comes at a cost to their health. And we know right now about half of trans youth nationwide avoid using school bathrooms because of safety or access concerns. The second thing we need to do is we need to look at the social life of schools. We need to look at school events and celebrations to see what messages they send about who belongs and who doesn't. We need to look at proms, at beauty pageants, at powder puff football games, at spirit weeks. Do these include all students, or do they other some students by laughing at or mocking a student's culture or identity? Do these school events have different rules for queer youth than they do for straight youth? And of course, one example of this is these straight boys being able to dress and drag year after year, while queer youth are not supported in putting on a drag show. But I'm also thinking about another event that I saw while I was at American, an event called Pink Prom. And many schools have these types of proms. They're proms that are designed to create a safe space for LGBTQ youth to celebrate prom the way that many straight youth do at more traditional proms. However, what I saw at American High, and something that upset the students greatly, was that they needed to have signed permission slips to attend pink prom in a way they didn't need to attend regular prom. And of course, students pointed out this could out people to their parents, and that could be a very dangerous situation, right? And so it's interesting to kind of juxtapose that policy that basically requires the outing of students to their parents with the outsized concern of an equity coordinator about participating in a cultural ritual she was concerned would out them to their parents. Students often learn more outside of the classroom than they do in it. So we need to look at the social life of schools very carefully for the messages that it sends about who belongs and who doesn't. Sex education. Now, it may seem obvious, but it's worth repeating. We need to look at sex education policies locally, at the state level, and federally. American High had a super well-intentioned, but like many schools, completely untrained football coach teaching their sex education classes. Right now, in almost half the states in the US, there are no requirements about being trained in gender or sexuality in order to teach sex education. Right? And so what happened at American is that this coach fumbled teaching diversity so badly that students from the Gay Straight Alliance ended up taking over the class and teaching their peers about gender and sexual diversity. Similarly, none of the school-wide sexual violence trainings that happened at American High addressed the way that queer youth, especially bisexual girls and youth of color, and additionally trans youth, were uniquely vulnerable to sexual and gender-based violence. And so what LGBTQ youth at American wanted and needed was actual sex education by a teacher trained in sexual diversity and sexual violence. And so the one thing I want to point out about this is that we know that limiting information about sexual identities and sexual diversity is bad for queer young folks. But we have evidence actually from Arizona that instituting a gag order on talking about queer youth in schools has resulted in less sex education for all students, straight and gay alike. So we need to create safe schools for all young people, not just a select few. And many schools are doing that by providing things like lunches and healthcare through schools, as well as combating school violence. But we also need to do it by having bathrooms that everybody can use, by holding events that all students can attend and feel included in, by using curriculum and course content that reflect young folks themselves and the diversity of their identities. So I want to sum up by saying that after almost 2 decades of decreasing homophobia and transphobia, we are now seeing a backlash. We're seeing the backlash in book bans, bans disproportionately aimed at texts about youth of color and queer youth. We see the backlash in laws preventing young folks from learning about gender and sexual diversity, and we see them in policies preventing trans youth from fully participating in schools. But we have the tools to create better schools for young folks. Schools are where many of our most important battles are fought, and we owe it to ourselves and to our young folks to continue to work to make this the society we know it can be, and to create schools that are safe for all of our young folks, not just a select few. Thank you.
Wow, CJ, that was wonderful. I'm sorry. One of the things that I've taken away from your book, and of course from your talk this morning, is that what we have to do as a country, as people, is go beyond the awareness. I mean, obviously, awareness of the GLBTQ community, particularly the youth, is really important, and it's basic to our values of each other as human beings. But it's got to go beyond that awareness to some solutions, which today and in your book you have offered. And that, I think, is one of the most profound pieces about what you do. It's not just awareness and here's a problem, but you do offer some solutions. The other piece that I had not thought about was that a lot of our so-called solutions, either as individuals or as schools or communities, we think are helpful, and yet they've been harmful because they either isolate the community or they force, particularly some of the kids, to come out to their parents or peers. And so you're right. In the case of the football coach, in the case of everything, when we try to have a solution, when we try to help, we have to be cognizant of the impact that we're having on that community. And is it helping or is it being harmful? So you've given us a tremendous amount to think about today. And I really, I have not finished the book because I keep stopping and thinking with every part of it. It's absolutely wonderful. And I would advise anybody who cares about expanding your awareness, your understanding of other communities, please get CJ's book and read it. It is really wonderful. And if you have the courage and the commitment, take your awareness a step further and see what you can do to change the communities you belong in to be a welcoming and helpful part of the LGBTQ community. Thank you, CJ, so much today.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you, everyone.
And now, let's see, I'm going to go back, see if I'm doing this right here. Bear with me. Okay. Our next speaker is another fascinating speaker, Mary Beth O'Connor. She wrote a book called Junkie to Judge, which she will be addressing today. Mary Beth has been sober since 1994. She's also in recovery from abuse, trauma, PTSD, and anxiety. Her story is chronicled in her memoir, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. 6 years into her recovery, Mary Beth attended Berkeley Law. She worked at a large firm, then litigated class actions for the federal government. In 2014, she was appointed a federal administrative law judge, from which position she retired early in 2020. Mary Beth, it's a delight to have you today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. And I do appreciate the mention of retired early. I always do emphasize that. Let me make sure, let me share my screen. All right, here we go. Share. Okay, great. So I am going to give you a sort of a 30-minute overview, and this is what I'll cover. I'm going to give you my story in brief, some strategies and techniques that I used in building a robust recovery foundation that has worked for me, as was said, for the past 30 years. I'm going to talk a bit about multiple pathways to recovery and treatment options. I'm going to address some legal issues that can come up in regard to substance use disorders and related criminal charges. I'm going to give you some resources, and there will be some time for questions. So I always say that my story in brief is child abuse led to childhood addiction, and that is actually a very common pathway. A high percentage of people that develop significant substance use disorders as teenagers, and by the way, substance use disorder, in case you don't know, is the modern terminology for addiction. It's the name in the diagnostic manual that psychiatrists and psychologists use because it is a mental health condition. I'll interplay those words, but just make sure everyone knows where we are. And I guess I'll also caveat with every time I say drugs, I always mean including alcohol. Okay. Alcohol is a liquid legal drug. It's still the most abused drug in America. And despite the overdose epidemic, alcohol still kills more Americans each year. All right, back to me. So, you know, I had a mother that wasn't connected to me and could be violent. But things got a lot worse when I was 9, and she married my very violent stepfather. He was physically violent to her, physically, sexually violent to me. It was just a very high stress environment. I never knew what was going to happen to me or to someone else in my family, what I did and the consequence. They were not closely connected. So it was just a very, very anxious household to live in. And so when I found my first drug, which is when I was 12, and it was alcohol, it was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which a lot of people know. And what I noticed right away was how much better it made me feel. I felt like my muscles were looser, like I was, you know, physically more relaxed, emotionally more relaxed. I was laughing and giggling with my girlfriend in sort of a more openly joyful way. And that really captured my attention. This is a positive experience. I need more of this. And so I pursued alcohol right away. I was looking for opportunities, making opportunities to drink. I would even steal beer from my dangerous stepfather because that's how much I wanted the alcohol. But I also quickly added in weed, which we called pot in my day. I did pills. I did a lot of acid my sophomore year of high school. And when I was 16, I found what became my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine. And I was shooting meth within 6 months, and I was in full bore addiction when I graduated from high school. I did leave my home area of central New Jersey to come to California to go to college. I graduated from Berkeley, and I did better for the first 3.5 years. I did worse than everyone around me, but for me, I did better. More alcohol, some other drugs, but mostly on the weekend. Occasionally, it rolled into the week. But I had a very life-threatening sexual assault in college. I moved in with a violent boyfriend, and it was really that the little bit of grip that I had on my sobriety, I lost it, and I wasn't able to maintain it. So in January of my senior year of college, I started using meth again on a regular basis, and I did not get sober until I was 32. So it was a really long, miserable haul. My 32, I was having physical problems. I was really feeling hopeless and trapped and debilitated. I could not hold a job. And my partner was ready to throw me out. And so it was sort of everything in combination that made me finally say, well, maybe I ought to go to rehab. And I did. I went into a longer term women's program, and it wasn't the best fit for me. This is in 1993. My recovery house, I found out when I got there. I didn't even know to ask before I got there, but it was animately and exclusively a 12-step house. And 12 steps are Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and all of the Anonymouses. And 12 steps works for many, but it's also not the right fit for many others, and it wasn't the right fit for me. But because they told me that's all there was, I did my best to, I read all the books, I participated in rehab, I was looking for the parts I could use and just ignoring the parts that weren't a good fit. But it still was worrisome when I was told that if I didn't do it that way, I was going to fail. I mean, repeatedly they told me, you're going to fail if you don't do what we tell you. And so when I got home from rehab, and this is now January of 94, and I will emphasize for the younger people, there is no Google, okay? But I got home and I thought, is it really true that there's no other options? And I got in my car and I drove to the library. And it turned out it wasn't true, not even in 1994. And so I used a couple of programs that I'll talk about in a few minutes: Women for Sobriety, the Parent to Life Ring Secular Recovery, the Parent to Smart Recovery. And I did it. I never ended up adopting any one program. I did what today we call a personal recovery plan or hybrid plan, because I mixed ideas from multiple sources. So for the 3 new programs that I found, I read all the books, I went to meetings, and I was always viewing myself as being the decision maker in my recovery. Not that I should, do it alone or recreate the wheel, that I should be open and listening and looking for strategies and techniques and ideas, but then I got to decide which ones I thought would work for me. And that was sort of my foundational concept. The other side of it was that, like a very high percentage of people with addiction, when I got sober, I had a severe trauma history. I had PTSD and I didn't know it. I had, which for me really showed up as severe anxiety. So like many of us, I had to address my mental health in addition to my substance use disorder. You know, I went into therapy with a expert in trauma. I did a lot of counseling. It actually took longer to get my mental health under control than my substance use disorder, and that is also common. My PTSD and my anxiety were older than my drug use, and they were more complicated. But eventually, you know, I was able to put my life together. Really, I can't say back together. A lot of it was new. A lot of it was new behavior, new understandings, new connection to myself. And then legally, I had actually gone to Berkeley Law School right when I graduated from college in 1984. But remember, I had started using meth again on a regular basis in January of my senior year. So by the time I got to Berkeley Law in the fall, I was in no shape to do it. I couldn't get there. I couldn't focus. I gave back a top 10 law school because of my addiction, and I knew it, and it was agonizing. I mean, I hated driving by that building. It was just a horrible loss for me. During those 10 years between college and getting sober at 32, my terminology is that I worked my way down the corporate ladder, okay? Because I couldn't hold a job, and every job was less money and less responsibility, and I held it for less time. But then when I got sober, I mean, I had a Berkeley degree and I had good grades actually, but I had an embarrassing resume, and I really was not in any shape when I got home from rehab to sort of start a career job. Plus, nobody was going to hire me for a career job at that point. So I started where I was. I started with a part-time, temporary, low-level admin job. And then I worked up into middle management. And as you heard, at 6 years sober, I went to Berkeley Law School. And when I got out, I worked in big law at a very large law firm in Silicon Valley where I lived. Then I did class action work for the federal government. And then at 20 years sober, and I emphasize those dates, 20 years sober, I was appointed a federal administrative law judge and took that early retirement in 2020. Today, this is my retirement life. My husband says I need to look retirement up in the dictionary because I don't understand what it means. But it really, because I'm retired, it's an opportunity for me to be of service in a new way. I can talk much more openly now. So I'm on the board for Life Brings Secular Recovery. I'm on the board for She Recovers Foundation. I'm on the advisory council for the Higher Calling Foundation, which help people get back to work once they get sober. My memoir is out, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And my memoir is 30% about my first 3 years of recovery. That's an unusual percentage in memoir, but I wanted to show an example of building an individual plan, but also a more realistic example about what early recovery looks like, about how it's a process and it's not overnight, and how many areas of life most of us have to work on. I also have written opinion pieces. I've had pieces in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and Recovery Today and others. Those are all on my website, junkietojudge.com. I do a lot of speaking to a wide variety of audiences. I do a lot of trainings. I train lawyers and judges and medical professionals, and I'm just an advocate in the substance use and recovery space. Some of the key ideas that I use that really, I think, helped me in the long run was that idea of taking charge of my recovery. It actually, when I went into rehab, I was really in a tough, debilitated place. And I also knew that my brain wasn't acting as well as it used to. In fact, when I was in rehab, we took an IQ test, and I was very relieved that my IQ was basically the same as in high school. That was a big relief. But I knew I had made a lot of poor decisions. I knew I wasn't at my best in early recovery, but still, I did trust my own judgment enough to know that what I was being offered wasn't going to work for me as a whole package, that I needed to be the decision maker and figure out a plan that was going to work for me as an individual. And that really helped me later because it turned out that that sort of process of, looking for ideas, listening to what worked for others, doing the research, building a plan, carrying out the plan, setting the next goal, that same skill set actually applied to everything. And so when I did it for my recovery, I was really building up my competence and my confidence to handle the many other areas of life that I needed to work on. It was also a real learning process for me to actually realize that the outcomes in my life were primarily related to my actions, not exclusively. I mean, there were some things that were out of my control, but the biggest factor in what was going to happen in my future were my decisions and my actions. I did not grow up in an environment where that was true. So it took me a while to actually make that connection. And then it really just reinforced that approach about taking charge of recovery and building a plan that worked for me. The other thing was that for me, a lot of when I went into rehab, I did not, it wasn't that I wanted to keep on using, but I didn't really believe that sobriety was an option on the table for me. I mean, I've been using since I was 12. I didn't think sober was possible. But when I got into recovery and I started meeting people who had similar histories to mine, often similar drug histories, but equally important, similar abuse histories, similar sexual assault histories, or domestic violence or child abuse histories. And I was meeting these people, and they were like a year or 2 years sober, and they looked good, and they had a job again, and they were, getting their debt under control and rebuilding their life. That started to really make me think, well, if they can do it, then maybe I can too. And so that hope, connecting people to successful examples, I think it's really a big factor in being able to do the hard work of early recovery. It's hard to do that hard work if you don't have some hope that you can actually succeed. Another belief that I really developed over time was about choices and goals, right? So, for example, when I got home from rehab, I made a list of everything I had to work on. And by the way, it turned out it wasn't actually comprehensive. Okay, there was more, but it was all I could see. But it was too long. Like there was no way for me to work on all of that from the beginning. And so I had to prioritize, so I picked 5 things to work on: my sobriety, my trauma history, my try to get back to work, try to get my debt under control, and my relationship with my partner, which was really on its last legs. And everything else had to wait. And so that sort of realization of prioritizing was important. But also, then what I did is I set goal number 1 in each of those areas. And then what's my plan to reach goal number 1 in each of those areas? And then once I reach goal number 1, what's goal number 2? What's my plan to reach goal number 2? And then eventually I can work on some of the other things that I couldn't in the beginning. And so it was that that learning process of being able to set goals, build plans, and implement them that really sort of snowballed over time, and I became more and more comfortable with it and more successful at it. The other thing that I realized is that actually, positive choices eventually become habits. And that means you don't have to spend your brain energy on them anymore, and you can work on something else. And so I know this is a small thing, but for me to actually get up and go to work on time every day, that was new for me in sobriety. Okay. I wasn't doing that when I was using. And so, for me to get up on time, get a shower, do my makeup, get to work when I'm supposed to be there, and actually stay the whole day. That was new, and it took concentrated effort in the beginning, but then it was habit. And so I didn't have to focus. And so what I realized was that that even though things seemed hard in the beginning, they would eventually get easier and easier. And I would be able to work on things that I wanted to work on, but that I just couldn't do right away. And that also relates to the idea of incremental improvement, which I really emphasize with newcomers. Even just think about professionally. Okay, I did not want to be patient or realistic about where I needed to start professionally. Somebody's not muted. But I had to be, right? And so learning that if you just focus on next steps and how to succeed at next steps, that step-by-step progress actually can take you really far in a year or 2 years or 5 years. And so that idea of patience and persistence was really a key part of my attitude and approach to recovery. And it's something I really emphasize with newcomers. I don't think setting a 5-year plan when you're 90 days sober has a lot of value. For one thing, you're not even going to really know who you're going to be in 5 years, because in early recovery, you're still reconnecting to your authentic self. You're still figuring things out. It's really, especially that first year, about what's my right next step, and then how do I build on that? And that ties into that success breeds success, right? As you have, as you see positive results from your efforts, it starts to make you more confident that you can have continuing positive results. And for me, that tied to congratulating myself for success, because of my anxiety, which was very severe. I could spin and spin. All I could see were the negatives. I was hyper aware of what I could have, should have, would have had if I would have been using drugs until 32, of every mistake I made, of every imperfection, hyper aware. I would spin and spin and spin over these things. I had to force myself to pause and look behind me and see my progress. Look what you've accomplished in 90 days or 6 months or a year. I had to make myself do it to notice it. And it was important because it helped me feel more optimistic, feel not only that I had success up until now, but that I sort of wasn't capped out on this, on the upward trajectory, that I was still moving up. And so these were some of the techniques that were really at the core of why I was able to succeed and build a strong, robust sobriety. I will say, though, that like most people who enter recovery, I did not have perfect abstinence from day one. Perfect abstinence from day one, it happens, but it's actually fairly rare. I used 3 times in my first 5 months, but that was way better. It was a vast improvement. Part of it is that your brain is telling you you need the drug, but the other part of it is really you don't have the skill set to be able to be 100% successful from day one. Most people don't have all the skills that they need. Those develop over time. But ultimately, as I said, used 3 times in 5 months, and then began my sobriety date, that is January of '94, and so over 30 years. The other thing, and I sort of refer to this, is the recognition that the plan changes regularly, that there are adjustments to the recovery plan. Priorities, making the priorities, but also sometimes priorities shift. But also, once you've had achievements, once you've met your initial goals, now it's goal number 2, goal number 3, or let's work on priority number 7 because I have the bandwidth to do it. But also being open to when the plan isn't working. Sometimes when I would, try to think of everything and build my plan, as I try to carry it out, I realized I hadn't actually considered everything. And so I had to sort of do the analysis again with what I had overlooked. And sometimes when we try to carry out a goal, as we're doing that, we realize it's actually not a good goal for us, or it's not as high a priority as we thought, so we can put it aside. And then sometimes we have really good plans and we just don't do them. And so then it's really about, why am I standing in my own way? Why am I not carrying out my plan? These are also things that I really emphasize with newcomers as well. All right, so I want to talk a bit about treatment options, just to make sure you know sort of the whole universe of options. First of all, detox. So detox is another word for medically supervised withdrawal. So for people who are on alcohol or benzodiazepines, withdrawal, it can actually kill you, especially if you're at the severe end. So substance use disorder, addiction, is not, it's not a black or white, did you cross the line and now you're an addict? It's on a spectrum. So substance use disorder, like all mental health conditions, can be mild, moderate, or severe. just like anxiety can be mild, moderate, or severe. So if someone has a severe, in particular, alcohol use disorder or benzodiazepine use disorder, they can die during withdrawal, and so they need medically supervised withdrawal. For opiates, people generally don't die from withdrawal, but it's very painful. And so medically supervised detox can help increase the odds that the discomfort, and I mean, it's actual pain, isn't so bad that people sort of give up in the middle of the detox process. For stimulants, generally speaking, you can do it on your own. But again, it's important to talk with your doctor and make sure that you don't need some help. The detox can give you like fluids, but also craving reducers and other medications that will make it easier. And then there's inpatient programs, which most people have heard of, those 28 or 30-day programs, but those aren't actually available to everyone. We really don't in the US have a system of affordable, readily accessible treatment for many people. An inpatient is, if you don't have insurance and you don't have cash, it might not be an option. But also, if you're on the mild or even moderate level of substance use disorder, you may not need inpatient treatment. So there are other options. There are day programs, but there's also intensive outpatient. Those typically are 3 nights a week for like 2 or 3 hours, so people can live at home and continue to work while they're in treatment. There are more therapists and doctors with substance use disorder expertise than there used to be. There aren't enough, but there are more. And so some people work with a therapist and or doctor rather than going into a more formal program. There's also medication for alcohol use disorder and opioid use disorders. Let's take the opioid use disorder medications, which is basically methadone and buprenorphine. Those medications reduce overdose rates by about half, fatal overdose rates. So the likelihood of death is cut by half. But they also assist with cravings. They can be needed for a shorter term as sort of an adjustment, or some people need them for the longer term. There are no medications for stimulants yet, but there are some that are under study, and there are some that are being used off-label. There are also recovery coaches that you can hire, and they will help you build a plan, help you work through the plan, help you deal with obstacles. And I've got medication on here twice. And then there's harm reduction. Most people have heard the term, but harm reduction means meeting people where they are and trying to save lives. So Narcan, which is the opiate overdose reversal spray, is one version of harm reduction. If someone's having an overdose and you squirt Narcan up their nose, it sort of kicks the opioid off the receptor and they will revive. And if they're not having an overdose, it won't hurt them. But also other forms of harm reduction are the medications. Some people categorize that way. Giving clean syringes. I used the syringe services program. Well, we called it needle exchange in my day. And so that meant that when I got sober, I didn't have HIV, I didn't have Hep C, I didn't have any bloodborne diseases. And syringe services programs typically have information about other treatment options, and they usually offer other medical and psychological resources, sometimes housing as well. If someone participates in a syringe services program, their odds of going into treatment are actually 5 to 7 times higher than if they do not. Peer support options. So as I mentioned, there are many. Peer support, of course, is what you see where people sit in a circle and they talk about their addiction and they provide each other with support. 12 Steps is definitely the largest. It's in pretty much every community. All of the groups I will mention have in-person meetings, but they're not all everywhere the way 12 Steps is. But 12 Steps and all the others are also online. So a lot of people participate online if it's not in their local community. 12 Steps, some of the key ideas are, having a higher power, turning over your will in your life, and following a structured program. Structured if you like it, rigid if you don't. And everything I'll say about these programs, some people are going to like it and some people won't. And that's why it's important that people know they have choice so they can find a good fit. LifeRing Secular Recovery, which I'm on the board for, is our 3S's are sobriety, secularity, and self-empowerment. And it's really focused on that personal recovery plan that I mentioned. The group is there to help you build a plan that will fit your needs and that will work for you. Smart Recovery is cognitive behavioral therapy focused, and it includes in the same meetings with alcohol and other drugs, it includes other behavioral disorders like eating or gambling. She Recovers Foundation is not just for substance recovery. It's for mental health recovery, trauma recovery, other disorders like eating, gambling, sex, workaholism, grief. It's everything together because most people who have an addiction have one or more other area to work on. And they really focus on strengths and the journey to wholeness. Women for Sobriety, which is the first group that I found that wasn't 12 steps when I got sober in 94. They're focused on self-empowerment, and the goal is to become a capable, caring, competent, and compassionate woman. And there's a lot of focus on positive reinforcement. And then there's Recovery Dharma, which is Buddhist-based. And they also believe in an individual journey and focus on inner wisdom. And there are others. These are just the 6 largest, but there are others. The good news is today you can do online research. You don't have to drive to the library. So it's really easy. The other thing to know is that the meeting formats really vary. And so some people prefer one meeting format over another. So when I talk to newcomers, I recommend they look at the philosophy, but they also look at the meeting format and try out a couple because people really have strong preferences once they experience them. The other thing to know is that there are none. So 20% of the people who recover from a substance use disorder don't do formal treatment or peer support, and yet 20% of the successful people don't do either one. And so some people are able to do it without, but many, many people find value from peer support. The other thing to know is that, 12 steps is higher power based, which, is got that religious connotation. But I will emphasize that there isn't a hard line where all the faith-based people go to 12 steps and all the non-faith-based people go elsewhere. That's not true. There are atheists and agnostics that make 12 steps work, and there are a lot of religious people or spiritual people in the other options because they prefer the self-empowerment focus, or they want to be in a group that's, trying to become the 4C woman, or they like the meeting format better for Lifering, or whatever it might be. So it's really about looking at the whole picture, and people can then decide what overall is the right fit. But it is important that people be made aware of their options, including because the United States is increasingly secular. And secular includes atheists, agnostics, humanists, free thinkers, and others. And the current studies show that 21 to 32% of Americans identify as secular. Whether it's where in the 21 to 32 range it falls depends on the definition of secular. Some of the studies count unaffiliated with any church, a specific church, but believing in God is secular, and some don't. But that's the general range. The other thing that's really changed in the last 10 or 15 years is that the religious nuns are no longer primarily concentrated in cities. They are much more widely dispersed geographically than they used to be. And there's also been an increase in the diversity in age, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. So it's really just about making sure people have choice. I do want to say I support 12 steps 100% when it's a good fit. And I know many people who have succeeded in 12 steps, but it's really about the fact that, first of all, 12 steps doesn't actually work better. It's the other groups are equally effective. So there was a study, it's called the Peer Alternative Study, and it compared the effectiveness of AA, Lifering, Women for Sobriety, and SMART, and found they all are equally effective. So again, it's that choice that's important. And it's really, to me, about when I talk to newcomers, I feel that I need to keep my ego out of it. I don't care if they pick the group that I'm on the board for, right? That I shouldn't care about that, and I don't. All I care about is how can I best help this person? And I do that by sharing information, including I'll share what worked for me, but it's really in the tone and the intention of here's a way I did it, an approach that worked for me for you to think about. But not that I expect you to copy me or that you have to do it my way, because you absolutely don't. There are many, many ways to successfully recover. I did this. So some of the things that the PAL study found besides the general equally effectiveness is that the demographic differences did exist. There were some educational, financial, and religious affiliation differences, but generally speaking, they all work equally well. All right, legal issues. So there are actually some difficulties in the way that the legal system can handle substance use disorders and what the legal system requires of people that have criminal drug charges. First of all, drug courts and judges and parole, probation, family courts, there's a wide variety of quality as far as how they handle people that have substance use disorders. Too often, there's really a one size fits all approach. And that's problematic because if the goal is to increase the odds of success of the people in the program, mandating that they all do it the same way is actually contradicting that goal. It's going to reduce the odds of some people's success. There can also be mandates about treatment. So again, we don't have enough treatment beds in the US, and yet in the legal system, there are many people who are forced into inpatient treatment that don't actually need it. Just because you have a drug charge doesn't mean you have a severe addiction that would require inpatient treatment. Sometimes the treatment that people are forced into is not evidence-based, and that's really problematic. I mean, I've talked to drug courts and they are so educated about what the current evidence shows is successful, but that's not true for all of them. It's not always true for probation or parole. Courts have often and still do sometimes not allow medication assisted treatment. So they don't allow buprenorphine or they don't allow methadone. That's actually an Americans with Disabilities Act violation. And the Department of Justice is starting to enforce that. So the Pennsylvania court system, for example, just had to do a settlement with DOJ because their judges were not allowing medication assisted treatment, and now they have to. The other problem can be that sometimes there can be severe consequences if people are 100% abstinent from day one. And that is a really unfair bar because most people are not capable of that. Sometimes peer support is mandated. You must go to 12 steps. The options aren't offered. That's actually not allowed because 12 steps has the religious component. But even if it was allowed, it's still not the right approach. Again, if you want to increase odds of success, people will do better if they are comfortable in the peer support group that they are allowed to choose rather than forcing them into a group that will be a good fit for some, but not for all. And all of this comes up in drug diversion cases, in sentencing. You can come up in getting your good time sentence reduction, probation, parole, family law related to things like child visitation or custody. There are a lot of good resources about substance use disorder at the national level. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, has information about what substance use disorder is, different programs, including peer support options, the ones I gave you and more. You can also put your zip code into the SAMHSA website and get a list of treatment providers. They're not vetted, but it's a place to start. And it has an evidence-based practices toolkit. It can be really hard for people to evaluate treatment programs and tell whether they're good or not. And one of the recommendations I make is to read that toolkit and then ask questions about the evidence-based techniques. Do you do this? Do you do that? Make sure that they're compliant. NIDA has a National Institute of Drug Abuse has a lot of data. There are a lot of studies in the last 10 to 12 years on substance use and recovery, and most of that information is on the NIDA website. Arizona, by the way, Arizona has the worst Department of Health Services website I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them. But there is some information there, including opioid and overdose information. Maricopa County's website is better. There is a mental health and substance use department with information, resources, data, harm reduction services.
Mary Beth, this
Yeah.
is Jane. I hate, oh, good. There's your information. I hate to cut you off, but we have to have our last two speakers on. Thank you so much. One of the things that I enjoyed, not only all of the awareness that you gave us, but the information about the plethora of programs, that it's not just the anonymous ones that may not be a fit for everyone. So thank you very much for that. But I was also extrapolating a bit that regardless of whether someone has the drug issue or not, a lot of what you said can apply to just having plans. how do you have a plan or a dream for yourself, and how that it's very important to have models and examples, and that plans change regularly and dramatically, and that we have to continually build our skill sets and our bandwidth. So thank you very much, and congratulations again on your journey from junkie to judge. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'll just throw out there that if anyone ever has any questions or wants to reach me, you can always message me through my website. And if you forget my name, just Google that junkie judge and you can find me, and I will answer every message.
Thank you again.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I'm going to go buy your book.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Thank you again. Let me see if I can do a share screen here. And we have two more speakers who are Scottsdale centered. The first, and I will let Linda do the introductions of our two speakers. Linda?
Okay, thank you, Janie. I think David is not able to make it. I just tried calling his office. There was a question, and I don't see him on our Zoom. So unless I'm missing it, David, you're not there, correct? Okay, I do have a very short introduction, though, I would like to give for him, since I wasn't positive he could make it. David has done some very good things for Scottsdale. We didn't always agree over all these years. We've both been involved in city politics, but on the whole, I really believe he wants to do even more good things, and he's done 4 years of good things as mayor, moving Scottsdale forward while keeping its heritage, which is so important because he appreciates that. I would just say this, as an architect on Scottsdale and California projects, he in the 80s and beyond, he was on the city council for the years 2000 to 2004, and previously on the city's development review board before being voted for mayor in 2020. His basic program is saying, why re-elect me? Because my proven leadership has successfully navigated Scottsdale through the pandemic, emerging as voted one of the most desirable cities in the world. And as a full-time mayor dedicated to young residents, small and large businesses, devoted to family neighborhoods and visitor hospitality. Those were all parts of his program and goals. And then I say in quote from him, I champion the anti-discrimination ordinance, which serves as a code of conduct for City of Scottsdale employees and citywide template for vibrant hospitality, which supports individuality and business success. And that was very, very important several years ago, and how fitting in context of what we just heard from our speaker earlier. I will then leave it to your choices, but he is definitely knowledgeable about the city of Scottsdale and what needs to happen while protecting its heritage. And I now would like to introduce Mary Beth O'Connor, who is new to the city of Scottsdale council candidates, and fantastic that since I've been hearing her in the last couple of months, has much to offer, and a new voice and a light to the city Scottsdale council. So I know you're here, Maryann McAllen. Can you get on now?
I am.
All right, there you are. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
You've got 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Okay, I would.
Okay.
So I'm Maryann McAllen, and I am a 60-year resident of Scottsdale. I have been involved in the city of Scottsdale municipally I worked for the city of Scottsdale as well as on commissions. I worked with City of Phoenix on special events. So I have over 20 years experience in municipal government, firsthand knowledge. But growing up here is a very different Scottsdale than it is now. But this morning I was meeting actually with Jan DeBoscus, who was just elected in the primary. She was elected outright. And I wanted to meet with her to get her views because I plan on getting elected November 5th. And I want to be able to work with her. And she's only been in the city for about 10 years. And the one thing that is that kind of resonates throughout all this, the people I've met, whether it's an elected official or a citizen who just moved here last week, is Scottsdale is a very special place. And the reason why they came here and their passion for Scottsdale, even though I've been here 60 years, they may have been here a week and changed their whole life to be here. When you love a city like Scottsdale, you love it. You're all in. And I am all in. I want to make sure that we maintain our vibrancy here in Scottsdale. I also want to make sure that we don't lose our cultural heritage. We've had this, our little catchphrase used to be the westmost western town. Well, we're not quite the westmost western town anymore, but we want to preserve that old town area and some of the traditions and heritage that we do have in Scottsdale, as well as some of the newer things that have been brought to Scottsdale. Just look at the Arabian Horse Show. When it started when I was a little girl to what it is now, very different, but still here, still preserving that Western and Horseville, but it's just a different presentation now. But for me, I grew up in South Scottsdale behind Papago Plaza, which no longer exists. And I raised my 4 children here in Scottsdale, about a different area of South Scottsdale. They went to Saguaro High School. My husband was born and raised in Scottsdale. He's been here his whole life also. And he went to Scottsdale High. So we are a Scottsdale family through and through. And I just want to make sure that people understand that I've been a community leader for over 40 years. Since I graduated high school, I've worked on lots of community organizations, boards. I currently sit on 2 boards in Scottsdale. I'm a founding member of the Women's Collective, which is a newer group here in Scottsdale for active women in business and management, as well as community organizations and connections. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I'd love to entertain any questions, but I am proud of our city, and it's really important. They keep writing I'm a political newcomer, but I'm not new to Scottsdale and I'm not new to leadership. And I am ready and prepared to be elected on November 5th to help our city maintain its uniqueness and to make sure that we're able and capable with all that we have to venture into the future. We're going to have water issues in the future, and we're going to have to make sure that we are able to handle our sustainability issues and make sure that there's plentiful water resources, and that we make sure that we don't have reckless overdevelopment, and that what the citizens want here in Scottsdale, that we hear what they have to say. And I welcome that. So that is my spiel. And I urge you to find out more about me on Maryann McAllen for Scottsdale.com. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I don't. I just, as I said, I've heard you before several times, and I really feel like City Council needs new energy, new light, and I feel like you are one of those voices that could really make a difference in Scottsdale. So,
well, thank you. One of the things is I will take our elected official who just recently got elected, Jan DeBoscus. We don't have the same political slants on many things.
Right.
But she's a very reasonable person, and I'm a reasonable person. And I believe that when you are in office, that you should be building bridges, and that those bridges are sustainable and that you're not torpedoing your own city, that you are actually working to make it better for everybody. And if someone doesn't agree with you, that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything, but we have to work for the betterment of the cause of the residents of Scottsdale. And that's what I'm committed to. And no matter how hard or how easy it is on some issues, it's about the city and the residents, not specifically about me or about any other elected official, but it's getting the job done for the residents so we can maintain that beauty of our city and make sure that it stays the vibrant place that people from all over the world come from to be here. And so that's my hope. And I hope you'll support me and spread the word, because we definitely want to make sure that we have a council that is responsive to our residents and not with a slanted view, that it's for the betterment of all.
Thank you. Yes. And I presume, if I may ask, you are supporting Proposition 490 and 491 that the Scottsdale residents will have on their ballot, that is to help continue the McDowell Preserve, which affects all of Arizona and tourism and, of course, our residents. So
absolutely. And
do you want to comment on that at all real quick?
Sure, absolutely. 490 and 491 are imperative that we pass that. I'm the former chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And, you know, there's all this opposition to it, that it's this big, huge tax grab. As a matter of fact, it's a lowering of your taxes, but it is a continuation. So you're still paying tax, but over a longer period of time at a lower rate. So this is what I compare it to. When you buy a fancy new car, you make sure that that car is upkept and you change the oil in it. You make sure it's clean. You make sure that when you purchase something with the residents' taxpayer money, that you maintain it. And some of these things we need to maintain and work. We could work better to maintain some of these things in the general fund. But in the meantime, to make sure that the parks in Southern Scottsdale that are more than 50, some are going on 60 years old, that they can't even be maintained. If you go around Eldorado Park right now, it's fenced off. There are parts of it that are crumbling, literally crumbling. We've just seen over the last month that we've had 3 fires in our preserve, and it's super important that we maintain our preserve. We've spent millions on it. We need to maintain it, and we need to maintain it. That's part of why people come to our city. They want the beauty of the Sonoran Desert, but the Greenbelt also, you know, it's beautiful, but it was functional. And the people who created the Greenbelt in the early 70s, and they had the forethought to have the Greenbelt and the investment in our city, because it was a floodplain. It's still a floodplain.
Yes.
And that's something that people need to remember. It is still a floodplain. And when the waters come through there after big storms, the golf courses fill up, the parks fill up with water. And that was why it was created. When I was a child, my father worked for Motorola, and they would have to sandbag the banks of the city where before. And, you know, I'm 60 years old. That was when I was about 4 and 5 years old. It was a big deal, and people's homes would be wiped away. It's hard to imagine that, but we need to maintain our city. And 490 and 491, which raises the base of our what we're able to spend, that is kind of arbitrarily percentage-wise capped by the state. We haven't raised that in over 18 years, I believe. And it's time to do that. We should have done it before. Former mayor should have done it, but it's time now. So we really want to vote that hand in hand, 490. I am in full support of 490 and 491. And I'm also in support of Mayor Ortega. He has led the city through, the pandemic, and done so wonderfully, and also had the anti-discrimination ordinance that could have been done years in the past and wasn't. And that is something, especially with the topic today, that we understand that if we're a world-class city, then people from all over the world come here, and all types of people, and we welcome them, and we want to continue to welcome them.
Thank you. That was so
Absolutely.
well said, Maryann. Thank you for being here. And
Absolutely.
best wishes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Janie?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick reminder to people that our next, oh, I'm sorry, here, I'm not, there we go. That in October, we have Chris Mays, our Arizona State Attorney General, and Francisca Martin with Keep Arizona Blue Student Coalition. And in November, we will have Adrian Fontes, Patty O'Neill, and Melissa Galarza. A reminder to go to cebv.us for information about propositions, and Arizona azeducatorsvote.org for school board. And here's a reminder on your judges. So thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Janie, and thank you all for being here. Have a great month. Vote early. Take care.
Hey, Susie?
Yes,
Oh.
sir.
Oh, I just double checking. Did we stop the video or?
Oh, I did not. Thank you. I never do that, do I?
I've